On behalf of CAI and the IT Metrics and Productivity Institute, we would like to welcome everyone today to this webinar on product management. Today's webinar has been developed by Dr. Christoph Ebert, Managing Director with Vector Consulting Services. My name is Michael Maludas, and I'm Director of Marketing for CAI. You will be able to hear Christoph and myself as panelists, but as a reminder, all other audio lines have been muted. Dr. Christoph Ebert is Managing Director at Vector Consulting Services. He supports clients around the world to sustainably improve product strategy and product development and to manage organizational changes. Prior to this position, he held global management positions for 10 years at a worldwide leading IT company. Dr. Ebert serves on a number of advisory and industry bodies. He teaches at the University of Stuttgart, and he has authored several books, including his most recent Global Software and IT, which was published recently by Wiley. Christoph, before we get started with today's webcast, is there anything else that you'd like to tell us either about Vector or about this new book?
Thanks, Michael, for the introduction. Very briefly, we are working in the domain of product development, product strategy, and organizational change management. The key topic which we have observed over past years has been the disconnect between what is a product strategy and the normal, quote, engineering tasks. And this is how our focus on product management has started. And I'm going to present today experiences from a set of industry projects around the world. Thanks.
Thank you, Christoph. Thanks for being here again. Today's webcast is also being sponsored by CAI. CAI is a global IT services and outsourcing firm that is currently managing active engagements with over 100 Fortune 1000 companies and government agencies around the world. CAI is delighted to be here today with Christoph to facilitate today's discussion, and we are looking forward to a productive and informative webinar. Before we start, we do have some housekeeping notes. If you have any questions during the course of the webinar, please feel free to submit them throughout the presentation via your question and answer interface. We will get to all of your questions at the conclusion of the webinar during the question and answer session, but I would encourage you to post your questions as they arise. If anybody has any audio or visual technical difficulties, you can also use the question and answer interface to notify us, and I will personally respond to those issues in real time in order to get you up to speed as quickly as possible. We're happy to announce that today's webinar and all future webinars has been accredited by the PMI with 1 PDU credit. You will be eligible to receive exactly 1 credit for today's webinar, and the code for that credit will be emailed to you in a confirmation of attendance email within 24 hours of the conclusion of today's webinar. If anybody has any questions about what to do with this code, we do have instructions posted on our main webinar site, and that URL will be displayed at the conclusion of today's webcast. Please note that if you are not a premium ITMPI member, there will be a small processing fee for accessing that code, that PDU code, once you receive it. For those of you who would like to review today's webinar more than once, or if there is a webinar in the future that you might miss for some reason, we do record all webinars, and these recordings are uploaded to our online library of recordings, which you can access anytime at itmpi.org/library. Please keep in mind that there is approximately a 5 to 10 business day turnaround time from when a live webinar is complete to when it actually shows up on the library site. Please also note once again that if you are not a premium ITMPI member, there will be a small fee for accessing these recordings. For those of you who would like to become premium members or would like to find out more about becoming a premium member, let me please just outline some of the benefits. If you can find out more or sign up at itmpi.org/subscribe for one flat rate of $179 per year. You have unlimited free access to all of our recordings, as well as unlimited free PDUs on both the recordings and also the live webinars. So we have about 400 to 500 recordings that are in our library, all of which are PDU accredited, and we do approximately 100 free live webinars per year, all of which are PDU accredited. So for $179, that's an easy one-stop shopping for all of your PMP needs for the whole year. We cover many different topics. You'll find that out if you go and explore the library site. We cover the whole gamut of IT management related topics. I also want to let you know that we are running a promotional right now, and for those of you who purchase a premium membership in the month of March, you will receive a coupon for 50% off all of our advanced PDU accredited courseware, and that is a coupon that can be used as many times as you want for the month of March. And some of those PDU courses are up to 32 PDUs apiece, and they're very intensive and comprehensive, and I'll have more about that at the end of today's webcast. So thanks, everybody, for your patience with the opening remarks. We are right on schedule. At this point, we are ready to begin. Christoph, you now have control of the presentation. Please proceed.
Thanks, Michael, and again, welcome to everybody to this webinar on product management in software and IT. The webinar is structured into 5 parts. I will very briefly introduce to the topic. As I already said in my introduction, the key theme in product management is to connect the engineering or IT side with the business part of the enterprise, and this is what we are going to look into. I will then look into performance and market success factors, which also gives some kind of external benchmark on how product management is used. We have then a chapter which gives 10 success factors for product manager, and I have selected these 10 factors from experiences in a variety of IT and software companies with which we had been working and where we had been introducing the product management role. And this also leads the way to the competence management part of product management, which is the 4th part, where I want to also refer to ongoing activities on certification in software product management, and also highlight how software product management is introduced in a situation where people also have to grow their own competences. Finally, we are summarizing and giving some conclusions, also some literature. I will start with a brief quiz, which has 10 questions where you just look into very fast and just give an honest answer to yourself on each of the 10 questions in a kind of yes, no, or don't know scheme. The first would be, can you list your key markets? What value do we deliver to each of your key markets? Does your product strategy clearly underline which markets you address and why? Is the strategy significantly different from your competitors? Can you describe how your organization creates superior value? Is your company perceived as superior in your key target markets? Are the relevant functions in your company organized to best deliver the value required by functions? So this is now getting into the interfaces of product management and the different functions. Is your product and marketing strategy able to cope with risks from suppliers, customers, competitors, and your own projects? Do you periodically monitor assumptions, risks, and business case? And finally, do your people understand and support the above points? In other words, would your colleagues, would your management, would other functions give similar answers like what you do in 1 to 9? And if you put this all together, give for each yes 1 mark. If you don't know, you put 0. If you put a clear no, we don't do that, or no, our product is not that mature, you put a -1. And if you then sum this up, you will find in a maximum, obviously you have 10. A minimum can go down to -10, which I have in fact never seen. But what I want to emphasize is often we are somewhere in the middle. We have a set of yes, we have a set of don't know, maybe a few no's. And this is exactly why we have created this webinar, in order to emphasize key themes. And when I will come to these 10 success factors, not all of them might be equally relevant for you, but clearly they should give you a trigger, a stimulus to question your own habits and behaviors, and then maybe look to 1 or 2 of those and move forward. And this is actually also the target which I have with this webinar, that you get a couple of good practices from industry in product management and think about which of those would give you a specific value, would give you a specific improvement in your domain. Let's start very briefly with a few definitions, just that we know what we talk here about. When I talk about a product, the very brief and common definition, it's a deliverable which creates a value and an experience. We should see the two aspects. The value means there's something where you say, well, this is really worth it. I put energy in it, in creating and distributing it. Or, from a customer perspective, this is something where I'm going to put some bucks on the table. Either or is a clear mandatory requisite that we can really talk about a product. And an experience, this is now the valuation from a user perspective. Is there an experience which is tangible, which I can put into words? And if these factors are given, this is what we call the product. A product offers typically a bundle of benefits, which is we typically don't sell the explicit product, but we try to address specific needs in the market, in a specific client, so that they would see, well, this is really maximizing my own benefits. And more from an internal perspective, it's not necessarily something tangible. We all know in IT and software, a lot of value comes actually from service, comes from solution perspective. For instance, where we offer a set of IT services maybe which are in the cloud or which is part of software, but we also help the client to best integrate that into his own business process. So that could be integration support, that could be maintenance contracts, that could be consulting and training, etc., etc. But this is what we call the product. And again, the key message here is we don't talk here about the product from the inside. We talk here about the product as an experience, as a user experience. And this is really what makes a successful product. A good example for winning products are the different recent Apple products, such as the iPod initially, the iPhone, more recently the iPad. All of those products actually came into market, specifically the iPod or the iPhone, which had been saturated for quite a while. I mean, if you go back in history a while and think about the iPod, there was not really much need for such a device because there had been a lot of MP3 players around, and they are cheap, they are available for many years, so why should somebody embark in such a market? Now, the brilliant idea of Apple at that time, and the same with the iPhone a while later, was that they were addressing a new segment, which so far was not so much in these products. They offered value chain in terms of protected content, for instance, or the apps in the case of the iPhone. In other words, it was a product with a business model which addressed or created user needs in areas where nobody would really have expected that this need is available. And the funny part, or if you want, the real business thinking behind is they always go into segments where people like to spend a lot of money. And that's also interesting because at the time when the iPod came out, you could get them for $20 somewhere in the market and supermarkets. However, when Apple's iPod came out, it was immediately much more expensive, and this made it more attractive for the people in this new segment who were more into fashion, who were more into impression they wanted to create, and who wanted to put money on the table. And this is what we call a business model. The technology is reliable, but not extremely innovative. Now, in the case of the iPad, in the case of the iPhone, this is not fully true because there's a couple of highly innovative technologies inside. But generally speaking, and this is what the technology analysts always say, is the technology inside is primarily reliable. It's not always the very latest which you can get. And that's again important because the positioning here is to make sure that the thing works, to make sure that it has an excellent quality and user experience, but not necessarily so innovative that maybe it doesn't work afterwards. And it's the marketing, of course. That's not worth mentioning a lot because you all know, but it's this connection of the different elements of the business model, of the technology, of the marketing, which made it a successful product, and which is always something which we should remember when we look into what is a winning product. Now, reality is different, and this is a couple of numbers which I have collected here from a different set of studies. The average, for instance, of product is about half of the projects arrive in time. Now, this has been true now for over 10 years, even less than 50% in the late 90s, but at least for the past decade, it's about half are in time. A third are successful. About half of the requirements is what appears in the final product, and requirements change with something in between 1% and 3% per month. So what do these figures tell us from a product perspective? Well, first of all, they tell us that in order to be perceived as a valuable player, specifically in the B2B market, we need to keep commitments, that is, be in time, deliver the right quality. Also, it tells us that half of our effort, or at least half of the requirements which we specify upfront, is not really perceived as valuable from the outside. And there are numerous examples where this has been studied, be it in desktop products such as Office software, where even Microsoft has a study around which points to a number which is slightly lower than the 50%. In the car industry, a lot of electronic functions which are rarely used, and there have been cases where, due to pressure in terms of quality, such functions have been taken out, and in fact nothing really happened from a market perspective. So the reliability was perceived much more important than 50% of the electronic features. So this holds for different type of markets, that we sometimes waste energy in making extra long feature lists rather than thinking what features really create value. And again, this is the lesson we should take from Apple and Steve Jobs in particular, that he was always wondering what could be left out. And you all know a lot of things which we would like to see, because we know them from competing products, are missing in the Apple products. But still, they offer all the functionality which we need, and they offer an extremely nice user experience. And this is why I want to pinpoint so much on this analogy, because too often I run into this engineering-minded product management and product marketing, which starts with the belief that people buy features, and this is something we should stop thinking. Hardly anybody is really buying features. It's just too often that we kind of escape to explaining that our product has so and so many features, and then of course the people would look to the features because they want to compare something. But in actually benefit is the business value is not coming from features. The business value is coming from understanding my client's business and then offering solutions to make his business better, to make his user experience better. Also on the change rate, what do we learn from that? It is the bigger the projects, the more complex the product, the more we should anticipate change. Now, with agile and lean processes entering also product management, in fact, we have done a set of lean product management and lean requirements engineering projects in the meantime. It's obvious that nobody, especially in highly innovative technical markets, can really tell us what to deliver at which time. This is what a product manager has to judge. And in order to stay flexible, it's also important to have a development process and change process which ensures that we can cope with change rates in the range of 1%, 3%, or even 5% of change per month. Now, the failure reasons are sometimes very trivial and sometimes rather complex, but in many cases it's misunderstanding of the functions and behaving in functional silos. So that, for instance, sales only look to the top line and want to sell as much as possible, making commitments which engineering later on cannot keep. Or engineers, IT experts, perceive themselves as the domain experts and nobody really should tell them what to do. Now, this silo thinking is a very key failure point in many operations with which we are working. And the key towards understanding the problems is that we, specifically as engineers and as IT experts, as technology people, we love technology, we like complexity, we love our products. The problem, however, is that we think too much in our own solutions, which we might have created over the past years with a lot of energy and heart blood, but we are not really going to try understanding our markets, our clients' problems and needs. And this disconnect is the primary failure point in many of our technology endeavors. Now, let's turn this around and think in terms of what are successful products and what does it mean to be successful as a product manager. The typical challenges are for the product manager, which we see in many companies, and we have done benchmarks in North America, Europe, and Asia for a couple of clients. So the picture is mainly that very often the product managers are either the feature responsibles, that is kind of system analysts or requirement engineers, or they are part of marketing, where they behave more like kind of preparing the field marketing. And both obviously doesn't make much sense, because in the one case you need to have the engineering thinking, in the other case you have to have the marketing thinking, while the product manager needs to have the business thinking. And this is exactly what I want to emphasize from here onwards. The product manager is responsible for strategy and results. He acts, he behaves as what we call an embedded CEO, a person who in the company drives the success of a product, fights for the success of the product, or in very simple words, he would get and fight to get some investment money inside the company in order to develop something, to get it on the market, and to get a return which is higher than from competing products. And therefore, product management is a key success factor for products in order to be successful in the market, in order to make a winning business case. And let's face it, I mean, very often we create business case at the very beginning, at the inception of a product, but we never really get back to the numbers. Or we kind of excuse that we cannot make the numbers because we didn't know the market well enough, we didn't know our buyers well enough, or engineer was too late, or marketing didn't do their job, or salespeople didn't do their job. I mean, there's 101 excuses which obviously don't help much. Product management certainly is not easy. That's also a part of the story why a lot of product managers kind of engage into whatever their own background is. It can be technology, it can be marketing, but this bridge between the two disciplines, this business perspective, that's certainly something which you have to train yourself, where you have to understand what are your weaknesses and very much work on these weaknesses in order to make them strong. Now, a key element which we often have in practice is that there is a kind of misunderstanding between what is product management and what is marketing. I already mentioned many companies even put product managers as part of marketing, which I believe makes not much sense, because with the same logic you can put them into engineering or operations or finance or any other function. A product manager needs to be independent. He doesn't need a big group or line responsibility, but he clearly has to balance these different forces which we have in a company. And business is not about marketing only or engineering only or any other of these functions. It's about connecting those and getting most out of these different functions. And this is why product management is not marketing. Similar to that, it is not engineering or any other of these functions. The product manager thinks in terms of bottom line and top line. He needs to think in terms of cost. He needs to think in terms of cycle time. He needs in terms of how do I emphasize a business. Within the enterprise, product management is somewhere situated in the middle between business unit, where you have typically a VP responsible for the business unit, and then also different product lines. And this is exactly where the product manager would then also has the best possibility to lever between the corporate strategy on the one side, but also the different needs inside product development, such as make or buy, such as new technology introduction, such as variant management and decision making across variants. I mean, these are all topics where the product manager is the decision maker, because they impact sales, they impact cost, and they therefore impact the overall business case. Product management is not project management. I think that's obvious. We all know what is project management from the project management body of knowledge and other sources. Project management is about one topic with a given time frame, with a given budget, etc. Product management is about making a product successful in a longer time frame with maybe different variants, with maybe different supportive projects. So project managers work on a specific topic and therefore support the product success. So if we summarize these different role responsibilities, we would see that one topic is product management responsible for making a successful solution, marketing being responsible for creating needs, and sales responsible for arriving at concrete orders. And we see with these gray boxes what are the tools which are necessary and which support each other. I'm not going to read all that, but it's very obvious if we start on the left side that a business plan, a product strategy, a business case, these are the key tools from a business perspective, while marketing looks much more into market analysis, into marketing plan, into the different P's, as you might know from marketing, Michael Porter, etc., pricing, positioning, etc. This is the marketing perspective. And then finally sales, which has the clear focus on capturing a concrete contract, getting somebody to buy the product or to buy the service, etc. So this is the role split of these three. Well, with this introduction, I'm now going into what are the success factors, or as I call it here, the 10 ingredients for winning products. And the first one, which also had been on the previous slide as a kind of a slogan, is to begin with the end in mind. And you probably have heard that many times. It's one of the key principles of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which, by the way, is an extremely good book on self-management, which I recommend to each product manager. But begin with the end in mind is that we need to have a strong vision, that we need to not only understand ourselves, but communicate to the person to give us the money, to the business owners in our company, to the different engineering teams, etc. What would be the difference if the product enters the market? What's the value? Why is it worth fighting for? Why is it worth investing money into this product? Also, it means to understand where do I put the priorities, where would I put lower priority, how do I handle the risks in my product management, and how do we really manage all that. The end means always thinking in terms of roadmap, always thinking in terms of what would happen down the road, and then thinking for yourself, so how am I now deciding today in order to get me closer to this vision, to this target. That's the key difference to operational responsibilities, which much more look to short-term targets. Product management is about achieving long-term targets and making roadmaps and plans which bring us in this direction. Second recommendation is to drive the product like a mini CEO. Now, I used this pattern already earlier, which is some business ownership, product ownership. Now, it's obvious that many product managers would not immediately be in such position. I mean, we see often, and we also recommend that a product manager, a junior product manager, maybe overlook a certain set of services or features or a version, a variant of the product for a specific market. A senior product manager would have the business case responsibility for a product and his derivatives, while the BU VP, to whom such product managers would report, he would look into a set of different products which might even relate to each other, support each other, compete to each other. That is, he would have the portfolio perspective. The product manager is the person who looks to a single product and tries to understand how can I manage this product, how can I achieve results with the product, and how to make it a success. The product marketing in connection with sales would ask how to best sell it. He's the market champion. And then a project manager, be it on the engineering or on the IT side, would be the implementation champion, the person who drives that this product would be successfully implemented. Now, leadership is a key topic for any of product managers, and often this is also a key failure point. I've seen product managers said, well, how should I ever handle such a complex task if nobody would report to me, or hardly anyone of the people I need would report to me? But this is exactly the challenge which also helps in the internal competition of the company, that the product manager really fights for the product and has good reasons why this product is better than others and why it is worth working on that product. In other words, leadership starts with what I said in my first point, which is start with the end in mind, that we have a strong vision, a compelling vision of the product, and then get people together who share this vision and who then build the product. And one topic which we have often introduced in companies is what we call the core team, which means different functions would have a person nominated, be it a marketing manager, an operations manager, be it an engineering manager, or whosoever, and they work together with the product manager in order to make the product a success. They together would build the business case, the business plan, or later on touch on the feature list. A product manager needs to understand markets and customers. Now, this sounds obvious, because how should we have a perspective on needs if we don't look to markets and customers? Now, reality is different. I was just last week in a company where we currently work on product management, and what I heard from a majority of the product managers in the room was that they would not find much time to really see customers, and I would claim, well, we have sales, key account managers, etc., who would see the customers. My question to them was, how do you then really get first-hand feedback on how they perceive your product, or even more important, why they are not yet a customer? In other words, it's for a product manager at least as important as understanding technology to understand markets. If we have to devote our time, the 5 days a week, into understanding markets, talking with prospective clients, etc., and understanding technology and driving a technology roadmap, the clear majority of ours should go into the first part, that is talking with clients, talking with people who are not buying our product but buying other products, trying to find out what would be the key differentiator that they move to our product. And this is to understand, and this is also to not use this what we call Chinese whispering, what kids often play and what I have shown in this cartoon here, that everyone has some idea, but the way they communicate is fully different from what they really mean. And in the end, we have this extra long feature lists, which, as I pointed out earlier, are actually just waste. I mean, if we take lean management and lean development serious and think in terms of one of the 5 key elements of lean, which is reduce waste, it is this 50% of features which nobody really puts money on the table for, but we spend a lot of effort to get it into our products. This 50%, the dark half, as I call it, not only generate effort, but they generate extra complexity, which later on makes the product increasingly difficult to maintain. So don't get into this debate. Talk to the prospective customers and try to find out what is their real need, not what features would they think about. Now, talking about needs means also to create needs, to actively engage into creating needs, and that is, of course, where marketing and product management meet, because this is how about we could create value with our customers, how the different technologies, how the different components, how ultimately, of course, also features would be prioritized in order to be perceived as valuable and vice versa to create a need. Now, the very simple point is here, we always have a set of, let's say, customers or people which we know they have bought the product, specifically in the B2B. It's very obvious because we have the customer list. Now, on the other side, we also know that, except for very few of us who have a very high market penetration, that there are obviously some companies, some people who buy competing products or competing solutions or maybe something completely different. Now, the challenge is to understand their motivation and get into understanding of what would make these people open their purse or signing a check for our product. What would be the differentiator? And a very brief answer is it's certainly not about copying existing product. This Me Too approach is clearly not what is perceived valuable, because at the end of the day you will always be compared. And again, when we think about Apple with their products, as I introduced it earlier, this was never about copying something. It was always about finding specific topics which create a need to people who had so far not even thought about buying this product. And this is the art of making a product successful. And our picture here also shows what people really think about when they think about value and need. I mean, hardly anyone would go to the store and say, I need this red car with so and so many PS and so and so much cylinders, etc. I mean, why do we buy a car? In essence, because they want to achieve something. Some people buy a car to get from A to B. Some people buy a car to put their family in. Some people buy a car to cruise on Friday, Saturday evening in the college streets or to transport something heavy, etc., etc. But these are needs. The cylinders and the different technical features, this is what we kind of get on top of the specific car which we want. But the real key to success in product management is to understand, first of all, what would be the need which is currently not satisfied. And obviously sometimes, if this is not expressed well, then the need would be, yes, I want to have this car with an engine, etc., etc., for as few as possible bucks. And that is exactly what we normally want to avoid, because if the only buying criteria would be to put as less as possible money on the desk, this is what we call a red ocean in product marketing and sales. A red ocean is where people fight each other on price. And if you are in a price war, it's very difficult to escape, and you typically end up adding features for nothing and giving rebates, etc. So the real success factor would be to create something which others would not be able to offer, and maybe even at the cost of features which might be perceived necessary but which are not, and again, a good example here, I don't want to overstress, but you can really learn a lot from Apple, and I was so positive previously, but I mean, think hard about the iPhone series 2 and 3. They had severe defects with the telephonic functions. I mean, essentially, and up to today, iPhones are not really telephones and are rather poor on telephonic quality. And when you see even now the comparisons, I mean, the Motorola Razr is much better in telephonic functions. Still, people buy the iPhone. Well, obviously, because it's perceived attractive as something which seems to be able to also make telephone calls, but I mean, it's not really the reason people buy it. They want to have a nice gadget, they want to have apps, they want to have whatsoever. But this is really what I call understanding needs. The real need at that time was not to make telephone calls. The real need was to have something shiny, expensive, with a nice screen. And this is then what Apple has produced and how they entered the market. Now, bringing this into a practical dimension is that we try to put dimensions vis-a-vis each other which show what is the value. And this brief example shows exactly how to do that. I put a couple of factors in this circle around where I say, well, here is an existing product. This is the light gray area, which, for instance, has a huge amount of functionality and performance. Now, on the other side, how would somebody act who wants to compete with your product? This is what I call the new entrant. Well, he would look into dimensions which you are not so good, such as usability, such as administration, such as automation. I mean, this is an example, so this is not really any existing product, but it's something which we often do when we talk with product managers and when we look into the product strategy. This new entrant would not start to copy your functionality. You see, where we talk about functionality, it's rather poor. However, he addresses other things which are considered much more relevant, like usability. And this is often key towards being successful. I was this morning with a customer, and we were looking into a specific IT solution with tablet computers. And I mean, again, we were heavily into functions, into business process which need to be supported, etc. My simple question was, how would the people who have that tablet, we talk about 1,300 in this specific case, how would they perceive that product if they have it in their hands? What would be their needs? Do they need a big or small screen? These people are on the road, literally speaking, so they need to have something which they can easily carry and where they find their way very fast. And suddenly what we found out was, well, here's a couple of, if you want, dimensions in this picture which are different from pure, let's say, functionality which we would expect from a tablet PC, but much more in the usability range. And this is what makes product successful, to think in terms of these different dimensions, not just functionality or pricing. Now let's get a little bit more into operational themes, and my seventh topic is about looking into top line and bottom line. Now this is not only finance, this is also how do I achieve a useful and say worthwhile bottom line. That is about cost control. This is about risk management. This is about having a process. I put here a kind of a reference process, strategy concept, development, market entry, evolution, which needs to have clear content in order to measure at each stage where is the product and how are we doing and what could we do better. And that also means that we have to continuously look into performance indicators, such as if you go here into the execution, the concept, the development, market preparation, etc., that we measure different factors, that we get user feedback as early as possible in order to make sure that we have on the one side the sales, on the other side also the bottom line. One aspect which we often neglect is that being in the IT and software domain, we talk about high technology, often not yet mature technologies which we have to manage. So this is also a topic of the product manager, to understand when is the right moment to invest into a new technology. How do I stop something which has reached some point where we would not anymore be successful in competing against others. That is when we come into the saturation plateau on the left side, which is what we call end of life, because now it's maybe only about pricing, and then typically these products are not anymore so interesting for many of us at least. So it means really to understand where we are in this life cycle, and also to understand different options which we have, like would we like going to maximize value, or do we look more into market growth? To all experience, these are two independent factors, and it's also important to have a clear strategy what we are going to do if we are into, let's say, a low market share as this point number one in the beginning, to think, well, how do we move now on, and how far can we get really on the right side? Now, I've already spoken about operational work and the need for understanding cost, and that also means that we have to continuously question our processes. Often what I see in practice is that there's a lot of organic growth in the different processes, tools, technologies, and nobody really who questions all that. One topic which I typically stress with clients is to at least take a couple of hours or a day and think, what would I do different, or how would I restart a business on the greenfield? Now, even if we know that this would not really happen, it's worth thinking about, because you can be very sure that your competitor who is just entering the market, and you know how easy that is in the software arena, they are literally on a greenfield. They don't have all the ballast of the grown complexity which you have in your products and processes. And only with that background it's already relevant to make sure that we have a good understanding in terms of how would we do better, and maybe then make a stepwise process is typically how we end up, so that over a 2-year time frame we'd say, this is how I clean up things. But it's very obvious that I mentioned earlier the concept of lean product management, that we have to continuously question ourselves, what are we going to scrap, what are we going to push forward, and how do we get rid of all these things which have been grown over so much time. This could be obsolete development tools, this could be processes which have been created to document a lot of things which maybe you can automate. This could be simplified referentials so that you can easier retrieve product components. This could be a much easier documentation. For instance, often I find that along the life cycle, too many people start again in documenting maybe technical features later on, user profiles and scenarios, how the product would be used later on. They would write technical guides and training materials. Now all this could be connected so that at the point when you create requirements, like a use case or a specific scenario, you already think in terms of how would this look like in my user guide or technical guide later on, and you have a single source for all that. I mean, these are all elements to make your development more lean. And finally, and that brings me back also to what I said earlier about the 7 habits of highly successful people, is never be satisfied. I mean, in our world of software and IT, there is always someone somewhere in the world who wants to get into our market and do better. And you have seen that many companies have had a rather short half-time. I mean, it's the exception case that a company like Microsoft is so successful over decades, as we face it, and even Microsoft here and there struggles. For other companies, this happens much earlier. And one of the reasons is that we have to question continuously our business model, our process, as I just asked, our product components, etc., and think in terms of what would be our SWOT, strength, weakness, opportunity, threats. That's the dark part here. But also, who are our key competitors and what would be their SWOTs? And you might immediately realize, well, the competitor SWOT has a couple of strengths which could be real challenging for your own position. And for that reason, we then use this as a kind of understanding what kind of reaction schemes would we produce, such as do we want to defend our product only? Do we want to establish new rules? Maybe features, services which are not yet present. For instance, I often face that product managers think too much about the tangible part of the product, that is the software, the IT system, the embedded system, whatever, and not enough about services. And often today, a business climate asks to have people with a very strong competence to also help to aligning or integrating a product, our product, into the business process of our customer. Now, if we could offer that, if we, for instance, would say, rather than selling the product with a license scheme of so and so much bucks per license, we would say, well, we relate our license scheme to the success our customer has in using our product. Things already look very different. And there's a lot of such things which would help that we redefine and therefore create new rules for the business we are in. Now, with these 10 elements, I hope I have provoked some ideas which would also work in your own environment. I mean, obviously, having only a few minutes for each of these topics and one slide is not enough. This is always the risk with a webinar. But I hope I could stimulate something, and I will now try to move, let's say, from business and product thinking into your own competence. And that is that we have to also think in terms of why is product management where it is. The customer I talked earlier about last week, it's an IT company which has 3 major product lines. Some of the product managers, or if you want, almost all of them would say, well, we are not sufficiently empowered. Now, I ask backwards, so why should your business responsibles, your managing directors, empower you? And then they would look to me with very big eyes, because that was, of course, very offensive. But, I mean, the reason I was asking this question was, simply speaking, that I often see product managers where I immediately feel they are not really burning for their product. And if people would not show me the motivation for their product, why should I empower them? Why should I give them more than coordination tasks? In other words, what I want to achieve and what we have seen in many situations is fight for the product, show your motivation, have the different, what we call elevator pitches, etc., ready for different target audiences so that people really feel that you are energetic on making your product a success. And this is what we call how to break this vicious circle of not being empowered and for that reason not performing into, first of all, performing, adding gradual or marginal benefit to the performance, and then to move into a behavior where somebody on top of yourself would say, well, this person is really doing well, and I see the energy, I feel how he is engaged in his product, and for that reason I will give him a little bit more in order to further grow. This is the way business leaders think, not normally, not in the other way, which is I first empower people and then they will deliver. Some people might say, unfortunately, but it's just the rules of business life, hardly works because we might, and this is the experience, get complacent with this kind of ex ante empowerment, that is empowerment before you have delivered. So in other words, it's first deliver, then it's more empowerment, and this is the healthy circle, and this is what we want to get into. Now I want to show and conclude with a case study where we have done that a while ago. It's indicating a company which is in IT with 3 phases which we have looked into. We first built concrete foundations which were adjusted to the culture but also to the environment. So this is always specific. In other words, when I come to conclusions in this case study, it's not something you want to copy, except that these 3 phases always make sense. But the introduction of product management is always very specific. It depends on the market, depends on a lot of factors around. Then we talk about the piloting, and finally we talk about the rollout into all product managers. Now, the concrete data points which I show here has been in a set of individual projects which we had looked into. In total, we had 178 projects in a set of different product lines. And we were just looking into these 3 phases which I have shown earlier. The, if you want, awareness phase with the foundations, the piloting, and the rollout. Now, the performance targets which we had related to introducing product management and strengthening product management was to improve on the commitments, that is, reduce the delays, to shorten cycle time, and to improve the quality. Now, our key theme was to keep commitments in terms of time and quality, and this is what we achieved. I mean, when we went into the rollout, you see very clearly that the delays went down into the neighborhood of, let's say, 15%, which was roughly also what was our target. If we look into the defect, it's the same ballpark, so we also moved way down. Cycle time obviously needs specific measures, and it's hardly possible to improve cycle time in a short time dramatically. But this was also not necessary. I mean, even if you improve cycle time by 10 or 20%, it's already a very big improvement. So the lesson learned here from the data points is that it was possible across a set of projects in the course of 2 to 3 years to improve and move in a good direction. Now, more important was also that we could work stepwise. I mean, these product lines were not moving in sync. I mean, each product line had their own challenge, and there was like 10 to 15 product lines, as much as I remember. So each of those had their own constraints. Some were faster, some were not so fast. Some wanted to wait until somebody else would do the first step. So we had to adjust the introduction and the rollout to each product line, which made it rather complex. But finally, as I say, the cycle time and the defect and quality and delays was improved substantially, and could be adapted to each business unit to have their speed. Some needed even 4 years in the aftermath. Some were finished already about after half a year in order to implement all these different topics. But each of those had results in their own neighborhood, and each of those had role models of product managers which they could use. I will now summarize very briefly and also provide an outlook. First of all, we talked about product management, and I underlined the value of good product management, which again has a number of impacts which could also put into numbers, such as better delivery accuracy, better quality, higher customer satisfaction. But all that is sheer numbers. I mean, what really matters is that our business is more prosperous, and this means we address needs, we address value to the market rather than getting lost in feature wars and ultimately also in pricing wars. A quote from a client on which we had been working is something which I kind of esteem very much, because it gives a nice summary from a perspective of a company. This was a company in the IT business with something around 500 persons worldwide, about 200 in engineering and development. And what they say is product management is a pivotal role for us. It's the glue that brings together operations, marketing, engineering. This is exactly what I am underlined with this core team approach. They underline also product management has a 360-degree view of the company's operational activities, while at the same time also look to strategy. So the skill needs are diverse, comprehensive, and challenging. I mean, this is something which we have to acknowledge. It's not a trivial task. But it's also the reason why product managers typically, when they do a good job, are really sought for, because, I mean, there are not many good product managers in companies. Finally, the conclusion was also the benefits of investing in product management competence building has far outweighed the cost. What are success factors? Now, I mentioned the first one was to begin with the end in mind, to have a clear vision, to behave and drive the product like a mini CEO, to lead the core team, to understand markets and customers, and therefore understand what are the buying criteria. And only after these elements are given, you can start to look into the needs. And then in terms of turning needs into value, what should the product really deliver? You remember this radar screen with the different dimensions. Then think in terms of sales and operations, that is top line and bottom line, and what are the impact factors. Manage innovations, manage technology, think in terms of what can be sold and where do you have to get rid of, because you cannot go into too many technologies at the same time. Revisit your process, your way of working continuously, and in doing so, never be satisfied. Where do we go in product management? I mean, the business trends which we all face in software and IT is global competition. This is extra high in our domain of software and IT because the thresholds are extremely low, which are necessary to enter market, and at the same time we talk here about a friction-free economy, which is it's rather easy to sell and provide these IT and software on a worldwide basis. Now this means we have a global competition. We clearly have cost pressure. There's no way around. But at the same time, I know from several of our customers that they even pay premiums to their software engineers because they seemingly have found niches where even on the very high-cost countries, such as in Europe or in North America, we are still competitive because, as I said earlier, you can rather easily work a lot, do that maybe at a low cost in low-cost centers worldwide, and still produce features nobody is really asking for. So it's the product manager who ensures how to position the product in order to get most bang for the buck, as Tom DeMarco once phrased it. There are a few others. Now, what does it mean for product development and product management? It's the focus on value creation, that is blue ocean as opposed to red ocean. Always think in terms of where are the areas where we have not talked about. Make customer part of the value creation. I mean, this is the major story we could learn from Agile and Lean, which is try as much as possible to work with customers, to work with non-customers. Make sure you talk each week to two company representatives who are not buying your product, but who you want to have on your client list. This is what makes a customer part of the value chain. Segmentation is a key element in the future because it impacts variant management and helps us to focus on on single buyer segments. We see more and more ecosystem and, as we call it, communities which need to be addressed. And finally, we also have to cope with uncertainties. I mean, this is also something which nobody would really free us from. I mean, the markets are highly volatile. We have to decide what do we do in the case of this and that change. A supplier might not be available anymore. Some competitor might come with a key feature we have not thought about. I mean, this is what we have to handle as a product manager. Now, one of the activities which we have started a few years ago is to help also product managers to build the knowledge in a repeatable way, and this is what in the meantime has evolved into the International Software Product Management Association, which is a not-for-profit organization where a curriculum and different competencies are built and which also offers certification. This framework, which is also shown here, obviously looks into the different elements of what what is the meaning of product management, but at the same time also make sure that there is a core part, this is a gray area, where a product manager needs to have skills and competencies. Finally, two literature hints. One, the already mentioned book Global Software and IT is a nice collection of, on the one side, what are the key ingredients to building successful products. On the other side, we have included a lot of case studies from some 10 or so companies and 20 or so authors who have always provided brief 3 to 5 page chapters where they explain some element of how they manage on a global scale. Also, for those who look more into performance measurement, such as what methods there are around to reduce lead time, to measure rework cost, etc. There's a book which we have created from a lot of our clients and with a lot of benchmarks on how do we measure IT and software. With this, I'm at the end, and I thank you very much for listening, and I'm sure we would still have room for some questions.
Thank you, Christoph. We have plenty of room for questions, plenty of time. We'll take all the questions that do come in. I would encourage all of you to take advantage of this opportunity. It's the best part of these webinars, which is that you get to ask your questions directly to the presenter, and you can do that by typing them in manually to the Q&A interface, which is at the top of your screen. I want to give all of you a few moments to formulate and submit some questions for Christoph. And while we wait for you to do that, I just want to take a slide to tell you about some of the additional educational opportunities that we have here at the ITMPI. If you're not familiar with us, these webinars are coordinated by the IT Metrics and Productivity Institute, which is an organization that was created by CAI. It's fully funded and fully supported by CAI, and it was created specifically to promote best practices education in the IT and software industry. To this end, we established a clearinghouse site for best practices education on the net. The URL for that is itmpi.org. It's all free access material. It's all organized according to 12 or 13 different subject areas within IT management. Fantastic site. I would encourage you to check it out. We also have webinars, free educational webinars every week of the year with industry leaders. We are doing 100 of these free webcasts in 2013. They are all PDU accredited, and you can find the full calendar, including all detailed descriptions and registration information at itmpi.org/webinars. We do record these webinars, and you can check out our recording archive at itmpi.org/library. All the recordings are PDU accredited, and we have about 400 or more recordings currently out there on the library site. As I mentioned in the beginning of today's webcast, we do have a premium membership that you can take advantage of. If you become a premium member, you will get unlimited free access to all of our recordings, as well as unlimited free access to all the PDU codes for the live webinars and the recorded webinars. So all fees that you may encounter within the ITMPI will be waived for a year if you get that premium membership, and that costs $179 a year. We are running a promotional right now. If you buy one of these $179 premium memberships in the month of March, you will receive a coupon for 50% off on all of our advanced PDU accredited courseware, and you can use that 50% off coupon as many times as you want on those courses. They are much more, they're very intensive, much more comprehensive than the webinars that we do. They go into much greater detail. They quiz you, and they have checkpoints, and they are accredited with multiple PDUs. In one case, the Software Six Sigma course has 32 PDUs alone. We have courses on project management, on requirements, on software testing. You can check all that out at itmpi.org/courseware. I also want to mention that if you're not interested at this time in the $179 membership, you definitely all should sign up for a free basic membership. You can do that also at itmpi.org/subscribe. And in addition to that, giving you access to all of the free material on the website, this will allow you to register for our webinars without ever having to answer any questions anymore, because all of your information will be pre-filled once you have a username in the system, and that's something that many people have asked us to set up because so many of our power users, they'll do 30 or 40 webinars, and they just get tired of answering those questions. Now you don't have to do that. but you do have to just sign up for the free membership. I'm on Twitter all the time. I'm on Twitter every day. I tweet all kinds of news items that are relevant to people that are in the industry that you need to know about. I also tweet about webinars and also discounts and coupons that we're issuing. So I think if you like these webinars and you like the stuff we do, you should definitely follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/ITMPI. Also, of course, on LinkedIn at itmpi.org/LinkedIn. So we do have some questions waiting. First question, could you please, Christoph, re-explain the 3 phases that you had on slides 37 and 38?
Yes. So the case study which I had shown where these 3 phases came from is simply speaking just the way how product management, or generally speaking, how such a change is built. So I guess the titles are obviously very superficial. I mean, we say foundation, phase 1, pilot, phase 2, rollout, phase 3. What does it really mean? In a nutshell, the foundation, the first part, is to get an understanding of the constraints of the culture, of the environment in which the product manager would be positioned. And this is, as I said, very specific for each company. I mean, it needs to understand what kind of markets, what are the responsibilities inside the company, what is the product portfolio, etc., etc. And from this baseline, not the least, by the way, to also identify a handful of really good product managers, because it's always good to have role models available from the very beginning. This is what we do. From this analysis onwards, we try to build with these key experts what we call the foundations, the framework, process, you call it as you want, how product management would look like in the company. And with this starting point, we have a kind of nucleus, a core of what is the responsibility, what are the methods and tools the product manager wants to use, and what is his interfaces and his deliverables. Now, in a very simplistic case, like in the company I mentioned previously where I've been working last week, we finally focused entirely on the business case. We said, well, the key deliverable of the product manager is the business case. So we worked with 10 product managers for a couple of days on business case work. Then we have now moved into what I call here the phase 2, the pilot. This is where they apply this now in their own environment, and we meet regularly to see how they are performing and how the business case is really working. And they would get lessons learned from it, but we would also derive from this phase 2, from the piloting, a bigger circle of, well, if the business case needs to be successful, maybe we need to measure defects, because defects create rework, and rework creates extra cost. Or maybe we have to understand how features are used in the market because our cost is too high, etc., etc. This is what we do in the pilot. And finally, in the rollout, when we are satisfied with the pilot results, now we have to go beyond this initial 5 or handful product managers who had been involved in the pilot phase, and address each of the product managers, maybe also address their management in order to make this rollout a real success. These are the 3 phases, and this is what we then showed on the subsequent slide in order to show how this specific company was evolving in their own product management introduction.
Thanks, Christoph. Next question. Are there any tips you would emphasize when trying to design a best-in-class user experience via intuitive interface?
Well, the way I typically address it is less technical and much more understanding what are the usage scenarios, what would be good practice guides. Try to talk with people who you want to get on board. That's key, because once they can bring in their opinion, they also get a buy-in to that. Also try to find out why people would be unhappy. Try to give them as early as possible, let's say, mock-ups, if that is feasible, or contrast the product with something they know. If it is a business solution in IT, try to find out what would be the key say, waste points or rework or points where they don't feel unhappy. When I try to nail down the user experience, I try to both look to the positive part, which is what are they typically doing and how would they feel better, but at the same time also find a few pain points to find out where do they suffer currently in their way of working, and which of those I want to really address. And that's maybe the key element, that we should not end up with a long list of maybe we should do that or maybe we should do this, but rather look to 2 or 3 pain points, not more, where you say, this is going to change with the product, this is going to change with this new IT service, this is going to change with the next release, and then focus the energy on exactly these 2 or 3 points. Try to keep the rest on a level you are satisfied or your clients are satisfied, but don't try to have too much, and then measure how these 2 or 3 are really perceived, and from here onwards you move with the subsequent release, etc.
Thank you, Christoph. Moving on to the next question. Could you please show the critical success factor summary screen again? This is on slide 43. And I'm sure if you
yep.
I'm going to leave that up for just a few moments. It doesn't appear that there was an actual specific question. It appears that the attendee just wants to view those 10 items again. So I am going to move on to the next question, but we will leave this.
Maybe we can add here that we also provide the PDF afterwards so people can read it. Yes.
Excellent point.
Or they can listen again to the webinar to better understand. I mean, these are all possibilities.
Right, that's true. We will. The recording will be available in approximately 5 to 10 business days.
Yep.
Next question. In today's economy, how do you persuade management to invest in training?
Very good question. What I face very often is that classic training is very hard to achieve, which is strange enough because looking to the cost of an engineer or of a marketing person or of a product manager, the training is still extremely low cost. But I see many companies who would say, well, we expect that our people do it on their own. The drawback in many cases is that we also lose value from networking, etc. So how do I persuade? Well, the first thing is I rather talk about competence and less about training. I think the word training has been something which we had used very much in the 90s, but over the past years there was a strong move into how do we build competence. And what we call, or what the person has called, how do I persuade, means how to relate competence growth to business growth or to business success. And again, this is something which we try to do always on a very specific scheme. So to give a very brief example, again from the company which I just mentioned a couple of times, just to keep it consistent. When I talked first with their management somewhere in late last year, I did not sell a training. I sold better product success. And then we thought in terms of, so what would that mean? And then I gave them a few success factors, like the list of 10 which we just saw, and I translated that in their own behavior. And then the side effect was that, well, in order to achieve that, we should have a training on business case. But that was their own kind of result. It was not that I was telling them, well, so here's the training, this answers all questions. That's, by the way, also to close that discussion, why I believe a certification, for instance, alone wouldn't really make much sense on the corporate level, because the real value is for the individual. So we have also to see training with different perspectives. But if we see training from a corporate perspective, it's about what is the immediate business impact which this so-called training will give, and then have to tailor the training to these needs, not so much to a certification or to anything else, because that's sometimes of rather detrimental value, because people with certificates put them into a CV and run away.
Thank you, Christoph. We have another question. How does a product manager role differ from a product marketing role?
Okay, well, I tried to show that on one of the previous slides, but put it in my own words again. The product manager is responsible for the business success of the product. The product marketeer is the person who translates the needs from the field into expectations to the product, or in the other direction, who takes the value of a product as created by the product manager or together with the product manager in order to translate it into what would be the need of a specific client. In other words, a product marketeer very much champions or leads the perception of the product towards the market downstream to each single customer, while the product manager looks not only towards this sales-oriented perspective and perspective of the price, the position, etc. of the product, but also into how would I create a product to satisfy these needs, or even more important, what vision do I want to convey to the different markets, and that's the real difference. The business ownership is the product management, the communicator of the product value downstream to the markets, that's the product marketeer.
Thanks, Christoph. Next question. You mentioned that there is no product management body of knowledge. Is there a reference material that you believe comes closest to achieving a common knowledge base?
Yeah, this was exactly what I've been showing earlier when I spoke about competence growth. When we have started with this ISPMA, the National Software Product Management Association, which is as www.ispma.org, we have exactly seen this gap of not having a consolidated body of knowledge. I mean, honestly, and I've been talking to a lot of business school people, you can learn marketing, you can learn project management, you can learn a lot of things, but there is hardly any curriculum for product management, and that is why we say let's do that, of course, with a focus on IT and software, and this is how this body of knowledge has been created. So in the meantime, there is a specific body of knowledge which is growing in terms of content and usage, but seen from an educational perspective of what we learn in school, there still is not really much which is taught. But I see over the past 2 years a very fast move into that domain, and in the meantime I know many of the business schools have today some 1 or 2 professors who really engage into product management, which is good news.
Thank you, Christoph. It appears that was our final question. We have just one more slide here. It's actually a daily newsletter that we publish. We publish it in 4 or 5 different languages. I know that we publish it in Spanish and Portuguese and German, and I think in English, of course. We're also working currently on Chinese and Japanese. It goes out every day, and you can check it out at aits.org. It's good stuff. If anybody has any additional questions for Dr. Ebert, he can be reached at christoph.ebert@vector.com. And if anybody has any questions for me or suggestions for future webinar content, I can be reached at michael_malunas@compeg.com. But this does formally conclude today's webcast. So on behalf of Vector and also CAI's ITMPI, we'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. We do hope to see all of you again at future webinar events. We are at this point formally dismissed. Thank you, Christoph, for your time today.
Thank you.